So I was going to do a video on free rent for 90 days. And I was also going to give you guys an update on the different laws across the country banning evictions. And then I saw this video by Ryan Scribner. You may have heard of him.
Essentially allowing tenants not to pay rent for a given period of time and essentially leaving landlords footing the bill for their multifamily properties and apartments and houses that they are renting.
Since Ryan stole my idea, it doesn't really make sense for me to make the same video. But I thought it might be fun to do a reaction video to his video and critique the shit out of it. Let's do it. Hey guys, if we're just meeting, my name is Vitaly Volpov. I'm a practicing attorney, an active real estate investor, and a part owner of a real estate brokerage in upstate New York. On this channel, I discuss relevant legal concepts as well as best strategies and tips for real estate investing. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you of all my future uploads. If you enjoy the content in this video, hit the like button and comment down below. Alright, so before anybody leaves me hate comments in the comment section, I just want to make clear, I'm not mad at Ryan. Ryan did not steal my idea for this video. What happened was last week he and I did a video right here in my office talking about the possibility of a housing market crash. And then off camera we talked about different video ideas relating to real estate and the current crisis that's going on. And I brought up the fact that New York State legislature is currently considering passing a law that would allow tenants to live rent-free for 90 days. And Ryan thought that it might be a good idea for a video from my channel for me to go through this law, talk about the different aspects of it, and then also give advice to tenants and landlords. I didn't really want to do that because my channel is designed specifically for landlords and real estate investors. So I didn't really want to give advice necessarily to tenants and show them how they can get around paying their rent and what this new law might be about. So I kind of shied away from that. And then later on, Ryan asked me if he could do the video, and I said absolutely. And so that's how the video came about, and this is why I do want to do a reaction video. I want to see what Ryan said about it and maybe provide some of my own commentary and context with regard to the video. So without further ado, let's jump into the video. And just so you guys know, I've never done a reaction video before, so hopefully this goes okay and looks okay on camera.
So earlier this week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with a friend of mine who is a real estate investor in the local area, and he's also a practicing attorney, so he's always able to fill me in on some great information related to real estate investing and things in the legal side of real estate, tenants, landlords, etc. And if you guys want to check out that full interview I did with him, I'm going to drop it down in the description below.
Appreciate the shout out, Ryan.
But one of the things that he pointed out to me that seemed very interesting is new laws that are being proposed that could potentially allow tenants to get out of paying rent for 90 days as a result of this economic crisis. And the reason why this is so important is because if this law passes in New York, it could set a precedent for other states to follow, essentially allowing tenants not to pay rent for a given period of time and essentially leaving landlords footing the bill for their multifamily properties and apartments and houses that they are renting. And there's also been a number of laws passed that affect tenants across the United States, so if you are a renter, stay tuned for the duration of this video. Now, before we get into the video here, guys, I just want to make a quick disclaimer. I am putting this video together strictly for informational purposes because I think it's important to be aware of what is going on if you're a tenant or a landlord, and essentially what are the laws that have been passed and what is currently being proposed. I am not encouraging anyone out there to stop paying rent or paying their mortgage, and I'm also not encouraging anyone to take advantage of these laws unless you are in dire need. You should only follow these steps if you are unable to make your rent or mortgage payments based on a loss of income, and if you are in a bad situation financially. What I'd recommend doing is talking to your mortgage lender or talking to your landlord on the phone.
So I'm glad that Ryan is making this disclaimer here, and this is why I was a little bit concerned about making a video like this. Naturally, people are going to want to try to take advantage of the situation, and I felt like a lot of tenants will probably, even if they're able to pay, will probably be looking to take advantage of this because why not? It's a freebie. So I'm really glad that he's saying that. He's telling people to be upfront and to, not take advantage of this unnecessarily unless they really need it. So I really appreciate that.
and trying to make a deal with them. Because what we don't want to see happen is everyone stopping their rent payments and mortgage payments, which could lead to even more economic fallout and stress on the overall financial system. But that being said, guys, here are the current laws related to eviction bans in the United States, as well as potential rent freezes or rent forgiveness. First of all, we have California, which is one of the states that has been hit massively by the virus that shall not be named, so this video does not get demonetized. And they have essentially banned evictions through May 31st. And in order to qualify for this protection where you could not be evicted through May 31st, you must be unable to pay rent based on a medical or financial reason related to the virus that, again, shall not be named. And tenants must notify landlords by letter within 7 days of rent being due if they are unable to make their rent payments. So essentially, if you live in California and for a medical or financial reason you are unable to make your rent payments, assuming you notify your landlord by letter within 7 days of rent being due, you cannot be evicted through May 31st. Now, it's important to understand that based on this current law, you can have the eviction process beginning on June 1st, and you will end up getting evicted from your current housing. Now, based on the current law, as soon as June 1st comes around, your landlord can begin the eviction process. And in California, the eviction process takes anywhere from 45 to 75 days to process. So in theory, based on the current laws in California, if you stopped paying rent this month on April 1st when rent was due, and you notified your landlord by letter within 7 days, if your landlord starts the eviction process on June 1st, when the eviction...
So I wanted to pause the video for a second and just point out that right now Ryan is looking at his phone to provide you with the technical information relating to the California law as well as the other technical parts of this video. And I just think it's important to mention how hard it is to make YouTube videos like this. Now, I've only been doing this for a little while. I've done maybe 20 videos, and I'm nowhere near as smooth or as good as Ryan is, or as Graham Stephan, or Marco from Whiteboard Finance, or Andre Juk. Those guys are pros at this. They make it look easy, and they're just smooth on camera, super confident, and they're able to provide you and articulate very complicated information without really checking their phones or referencing notes or anything like that, because they're that rehearsed and they know their stuff so well. So definitely, kudos to them, kudos to Ryan, and if once in a while they need to check their phone, well, I definitely take my hat off to them because I know how hard this is. And if you've never done a YouTube video, just try it. Get on camera and see how easy it is to speak to a camera, to an empty room with no one else behind the camera, and try to articulate something that you might know something about. It's not as easy as it looks, and these guys make it look really easy.
Ban is lifted, you would be evicted around mid-July to mid-August, depending on how long that eviction process takes. Now next we have New York, who did a similar ban on evictions, but they actually took it a step further than California by doing a 90-day eviction ban in New York State, effective.
By the way, I also want to point out that in each of these cases, both California and New York, it's not the legislature of those states that actually is passing laws. What's happening is the governors of each state are issuing executive orders which have the force of law, but they're basically making unilateral decisions for the entire state and using their inherent executive powers and issue these types of orders that impose limitations on what people and businesses and landlords can and cannot do.
March 20th, which essentially means nobody can be evicted until June 20th based on the current law. And this means that no residential or commercial tenants can be evicted until June 20th. Now in New York, the eviction process takes anywhere from 1 to 2 months. So assuming you stopped paying rent right now, your landlord could not begin the eviction process until June 20th, which means you would be evicted around the end of July or the end of August based on how long that eviction process takes.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. Until about June of last year, New York State had a much shorter eviction time frame. In June of 2019, the legislature passed a new law that basically extended all of the eviction filing deadlines and timeframes that were involved, and it stretched the eviction process from what originally was maybe a month to 45 days to now it could be as long as 90 days. And I actually did a video, my very first video on this channel, talking specifically about that law when it came out. And so if you guys are in New York, if you're interested in learning about it, you guys can check it out. I'm going to throw it up in the card above, and I'm going to drop a link to the video down below as well in the description. So if you're interested, check it out. But I just want to point that out.
Now, New York and California are the first two states to have any kind of eviction bans in place, but other states and...
So that's actually not entirely correct. Besides New York State and California, there are currently approximately 27 states that have some form of an eviction ban. In some of those states, it's by executive order of the governors of those states, like I mentioned, and in other states, it's through the court system being shut down for a certain period of time and the court system not accepting any new filings for evictions. And there are also differences in the time frames for how long some of these bans are going to be in effect. And there are also differences as to what is involved, whether or not the tenants are supposed to show some kind of hardship or provide notices to their landlords or a number of different things. So it's kind of a big patchwork right now where some states have it, some states don't, but a majority of the states right now have some sort of an eviction ban. And what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to drop a link to a website that does a really good job of summarizing and keeping people up to date on these new bans that are going up and that are in effect right now across the country. So if you guys are interested and you want to check on your state to see what your state is doing about eviction bans, you can check it out there. So let's see what else Ryan has to say about that.
Cities are likely to follow, and here's a couple of different areas that are talking about eviction bans or have done a localized eviction ban in a given city. First of all, we have Florida discussing the possibility of a similar eviction ban in that state. Seattle passed a law stating there will be no evictions for 60 days or until the virus is over. In Boston, a number of large apartment owners have agreed to a 90-day halt on evictions, essentially just on a good faith agreement or saying that we're going to do the right thing. We own so many apartments in Boston, we will agree not to process evictions.
So I also want to comment on this too. So when people say landlords doing the right thing by agreeing not to charge tenants rent or forgiving rent or all those things, it's great when landlords have the financial means to do that. And what Ryan just mentioned is landlords who are in Boston, who are larger landlords, who have the money, who have the capacity to do a 2-month or 3-month forgiveness of rent. But according to recent statistics, there are approximately 8 million landlords across the United States who own only between 1 and 10 properties. And a lot of them are middle-class working people who may have a few rentals here and there, and those people are the ones who are also being affected by these types of bans on evictions and also by the laws authorizing tenants not to pay rent. And those people do not have the ability to simply forgive rent or give breaks to tenants because they just don't have the financial means to do so. Those landlords may have lost jobs themselves, they may be laid off, their hours may be cut at work, their spouses may be out of work as well. It's not as simple as saying, well, the landlord should do the right thing. And that's something that politicians and a lot of advocates don't really care to understand or take into account, that the majority of landlords in this country and the ones that provide housing for 45 million people, those 8 million landlords provide housing for 45 million people, they are not in a position to do these types of voluntary rent freezes or rent abatements. And so when people say do the right thing, I don't think it actually means what people think it means in this context.
For 90 days. Kentucky has also enacted a ban on evictions, and Trump also suspended all HUD evictions and foreclosures through the month of April. But New York is potentially looking at taking this a step further because millions of people in New York, essentially the epicenter for this virus, are seeking rent relief. And essentially, this wouldn't just be an eviction ban, this would be a period of time where tenants are not required to pay rent if they have some kind of medical or economic fallout related to the virus.
So there are a couple of things that I want to touch on that Ryan just mentioned. And I'm going to put the language of the bill right up on the screen so you guys can see it as well while I'm talking about it. So first of all, this does apply to both residential tenants and small commercial tenants. And it provides that those tenants will be eligible for this rent forgiveness if, quote, they lost income. However, it doesn't say how much income they have to have lost. It doesn't say that tenants who are individuals have to have lost their jobs or have been laid off or anything like that at all. It actually provides no criteria of exactly what is happening with them financially other than to say that they've lost some income. Well, I think that most people will agree that almost everyone right now has lost some income as a result of the crisis that's happening. And so this becomes a very vague standard in my opinion, and this is one of the problems with this bill. Because what's going to happen is if this passes, most tenants are just going to say, I lost income and I don't want to pay my rent. And there's no provision here for providing anything to the landlord in terms of proof of what happened or even swearing to the fact that they lost income. It simply is they lost income, and as vague as it is, they just don't have to pay any rent. And the other thing with this bill is that it provides that if a tenant's lease is up during this 90-day period, that the lease is automatically renewed at the current rent charged. So basically it imposes not only an obligation on landlords not to collect any rent, but it also says that the tenant automatically gets a new lease term for the same amount, which if a tenant was paying maybe under market and the intent on the landlord's part was to move that tenant along and maybe do renovations in the building or do anything else, this locks the landlord into another rental period at the same rent, which may be under market. And that's something that's completely uncalled for and unnecessary at this point.
And what the landlords would have to do essentially is call up their lenders on the phone and try to make a deal with the banks that allowed them to make a partial payment or possibly delay mortgage payments altogether. And speaking of...
So Ryan is not entirely correct on this point though. So the same bill that talks about the freeze on rents also has a provision in it that says that if a landlord is going to suffer a financial hardship as a result of the rent freeze, they can actually automatically get a mortgage abatement, and there's this whole formula in here for how the mortgage is going to be abated based on how many or if all of the tenants decide to take advantage of this rent freeze. And if the landlord loses 100% of their rental income, they can get 100% of their mortgage abated for the 90 days. Or if only 50% of the tenants take advantage of it, then the landlord would only have to pay 50% to the lender. So with that respect, I don't think Ryan is entirely correct, but let's see what else he says.
New York State has already passed a mortgage relief law, whereas if you are unable to make mortgage payments based on not working or only working part-time, banks and financial institutions are required to waive mortgage payments for a 90-day period. And it's important to understand...
Yeah, and what the ban that he's talking about right now is something that was ordered by the governor, and that only applies to residential mortgages. And it does not apply to commercial mortgages. So if you own a rental property in an LLC or a corporation, for example, you're not going to be entitled to that relief, the 90-day mortgage abatement that was ordered by Governor Cuomo. You would still have to do what Ryan talked about a minute ago. You'd have to call your lender and actually negotiate with them and try to get some kind of a deal. If the bill passes that he's talking about, then that would be an automatic for both individuals and corporations or LLCs that own rental properties. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
And this is not an exemption of mortgage payments, whereas the rent relief bill that is being proposed is an exemption. If you were to do this with your mortgage company, they would essentially tack on those 3 payments at the end of your mortgage. So rather than having a 30-year mortgage, it would become a 30-year mortgage plus the 3 payments at the end that you missed because of this mortgage relief. So in theory, if this bill passes and tenants do not have to pay rent here in New York State for 90 days, landlords should be able to go to their financial institutions and make a deal with them where they don't have to make mortgage payments for a 90-day period. And the idea here is that this puts the strain on the banks and not the tenants and not the landlords, and the banks have already been propped up by the federal government. However, it's important to remember that the mortgage is not the only expense that a landlord is paying. They also have to pay taxes, insurance, repairs, and in some cases utilities or other related operating expenses. So it's definitely not a perfect scenario where everyone ends up scot-free here, because if this ends up passing, landlords are going to take a hit. So that being said, guys, based on this information, here is what I would recommend doing. And again, this is not any kind of financial advice. This is strictly my opinion. If you are largely unaffected by the virus, which many people are, you should continue doing the right thing. If you work remotely or your pay wasn't cut, continue paying your mortgage or continue paying rent, as to not put a larger strain on the financial system. Now, if you lost some or all of your income related to losing your job, the very first thing that you should do is file for unemployment, because that is the safety net put in place for an exact scenario like this. After that, you should sit down and have a discussion with...
Yeah, I think this is really good advice. And the part about unemployment right now is that under the CARES Act, the federal government is actually providing enhanced unemployment benefits of up to 4 months of up to $600 more than the state benefit. So in New York State, the weekly benefit is up to $504 depending on people's income. With the federal benefit added on top of it, it's supposed to be up to $1,104 per week for tenants, or for anyone really. And when it comes to tenants being able to or not being able to make rent payments, I think this should go a long way, and it's already a pretty big help for tenants in order to do that. In addition, we've all heard, and Ryan has done a bunch of videos on this already, talking about the $1,200 stimulus check that everyone's supposed to get. And not only that, there's also the $500 stimulus check that comes in for every dependent child. And if there's, husband and a wife in the household and they have 2 or 3 kids, that could be a substantial amount of money that they can use to, buy groceries, purchase all the necessities that they need, and should also, in theory, be able to pay all the rent that is due. And hopefully that happens, but piling this bill on top of it in New York, I think would be a real disservice to the real estate industry, to landlords, and frankly to governments and everybody else, because this is an ecosystem that is interconnected. Once you put an undue burden on one group within the ecosystem, it's going to have a ripple effect and affect everybody. So if landlords aren't getting rent from their tenants, they're unable to pay their utilities. They're unable to pay the taxes. Those taxes fund local governments. They fund the school districts. They fund the cities and city services, police, fire, utilities, garbage collection, all those things. All those things are going to get impacted if the landlords aren't able to make their revenue that they normally would have been making if it wasn't for all the shutdowns. So I think just generally, people need to really sit down, and by people I mean politicians, sit down, really consider all the effects of what's happening, and also consider what federal benefits and what other direct payments are going to the tenants that are already helping them, with this situation, and not put an undue burden on the system. And so that's just my 2 cents. That's my opinion on this whole thing. But Ryan is absolutely correct. He's 100% right on what you should be doing if you're a tenant and you're affected by this.
Your landlord about partial rent payments or a similar deal you may be able to make with them. And if you did lose some or all of your income, you should qualify for unemployment. And in theory, this should allow you to make partial or full payments to your mortgage company or your landlord. But if you find yourself in a situation where you are totally unable to make mortgage payments or rent payments, talk to your landlord, write them a letter, or call your mortgage company up and at least explain the situation to them and notify them that you are going to be unable to make payments. Hopefully you are in a state where there is an eviction ban, which will give you a period of time where you don't have to worry about eviction. But it's important to understand that if you don't pay your rent, as soon as the eviction ban is lifted, your landlord can begin the eviction process. But anyways, guys, that's going to wrap up this video. That is an overview on what is going on with these laws surrounding eviction bans and potentially a rent freeze that may happen here in New York if that bill is passed. And that may, like I said, set a precedent for other states.
So one last thing on the New York bill. The good news is, at least for landlords, is it sounds like the governor is not really in favor of this bill. A few times during his press conferences, Governor Cuomo was asked about this bill and whether or not this is going to be happening, whether or not he would sign a bill like that if the legislature passed it. And he basically brushed it off. He kind of said, what's the need? We don't need to have that bill right now. No one's getting evicted. No one's losing their housing. If you can't pay, don't pay, basically is what he said. But at least, at the very least, right now, that's not on the table. That doesn't mean that that won't change, because the legislature still has the bill. It's still there. They could still pass it, a month from now, 2 months from now, and the governor could still change his mind. And depending on how many New Yorkers are impacted, and of course, New York City tenants are impacted the most right now, it could still pass. And unfortunately, landlords could be hurt really bad as a result of this, and so will the rest of the state and the real estate industry.
States to follow. So let me know what you think about this down in the comment section below. Do you guys agree or disagree with eviction bans and rent freezes? I would love to hear what you guys think. We can get the conversation started down there. But thanks so much for watching this video, guys. Subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure you hit that bell to be notified of future uploads. I'm going to do my best to keep you guys updated on important news topics just like this, so you definitely don't want to miss out. But I will see you guys in the next video.
Cool. All right, so awesome video by Ryan. If you guys aren't subscribed to Ryan's channel, definitely subscribe, and I'll drop a link to his channel down below. I'm sure you all know him. If you found this video, it's probably because you know him, but if you haven't subscribed to him, definitely subscribe. Let me know in the comments to this video what other types of videos you would like to see from me. I have a bunch of different things that I could do. I can keep talking about current events, talking about real estate industry and the crisis. I can also talk about real estate investing topics. I've got a pretty substantial tutorial video plan that I can really get into if people are interested in it, as to how I evaluate rental properties, what I look for in terms of cash flow and all those things, and I can really go in depth on that. The reason I haven't put that out yet is because right now I'm not sure how many people are actually in that frame of mind where they're looking for new rental properties. But if you guys tell me that you are interested in that, if you're looking for rental properties, I'll be happy to do that video. So just let me know. Other things I could talk about, of course, are legal topics relating to real estate, or really other legal topics as well, if you guys are interested, and my personal investments and what I'm doing, and my business partner, what we're doing. So whatever, any of those topics, whatever you think is interesting, let me know. Drop a comment down below. I'm going to read them all, and I'll respond, and also hopefully make some new videos that you guys will like. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Like I said, I've never done a reaction video before, so hopefully this comes out okay. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. So with that said, thank you for watching, guys. Please be safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.